The thermometer hit 110 degrees when Brock screamed at me to get off his site. He thought firing the only certified high-temp specialist mid-pour was a power move. He didn't know I held the chemical patent that kept his foundation liquid. As I drove away, I didn't cry. I watched the clock, knowing exactly when his multi-million-dollar slab would turn into a worthless, cracking tombstone. In the construction world, concrete doesn't wait for anyone. It doesn't care about your budget, your schedule, or your ego. Once that drum starts spinning and the chute opens, you are on the clock. And on a day like today, with the Arizona sun hammering down like a physical weight, that clock was ticking 3 times faster than usual. It was 10:45 a.m., and the ambient temperature was already 106 degrees. By noon, it would hit 110. We were pouring the foundation for the Sterling Complex, a massive luxury residential project that demanded absolute perfection. The specs called for a Type V mix, high sulfate resistance, ultra-low permeability. It was a fussy, arrogant blend of chemicals that behaved like a moody teenager if you looked at it wrong. I stood near the pump truck, my boots coated in gray dust, checking the slump test. I'm Natalia Hill. Most of the guys in the trade just call me Hill or, behind my back, the Alchemist. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent 25 of those years with my hands in the mud. I don't just pour concrete, I engineer its survival. Slump is at 4 inches, Natalia, Sarah yelled over the roar of the engine. She was my apprentice, a 22-year-old kid with a good heart but shaking hands. She looked terrified, sweat cutting clean lines through the dust on her face. Too stiff for this heat, Sarah, I shouted back, wiping the grit from my forehead. The water is evaporating before it even hits the rebar. We need to add the retarder now, or we're going to get cold joints within 20 minutes. I reached for the admixture tank on the truck. This was my domain. The specific chemical blend we were using required a precise, on-site adjustment based on real-time temperature readings. It was a high-stakes chemistry set, and I was the only one on this site certified by the manufacturer to touch it. Hey, Hill. The voice cut through the mechanical noise like a rusty saw. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Brock Halloway. Brock was the site foreman, a position he occupied solely because his uncle owned Halloway Construction. He was 32, wore designer work boots that had never seen a shovel, and walked around with a clipboard like it was a scepter. He hated me. He hated that I knew more than him, he hated that the crew listened to me, and he specifically hated that a middle-aged woman was the highest-paid specialist on his payroll. He stomped over, kicking up a cloud of dust that coated my shins. What are you doing with the mix? We are on a schedule. I'm adding the retarder, Brock, I said, keeping my voice level. It's 106 degrees. If we don't slow down the hydration process, the bottom layer is going to set before we get the top layer on. You'll have a cold joint running the entire length of the west wall. Brock got into my personal space. I could smell his cologne, a sharp, expensive scent that had no business on a construction site. I didn't authorize any additives. The truck left the plant at spec. The plant is 40 minutes away, I explained, trying to dumb it down without sounding condescending. The drum temperature has risen 15 degrees since then. The slump is dropping. If I don't dose this load, it's going to flash set in the pump. You always have an excuse to slow us down, Brock sneered, looking around to make sure Derek, his lackey assistant, was watching. Just pour the damn mud, Natalia. Mr. Sterling is coming by at 2, and I want this section finished. I looked at the massive expanse of rebar, a steel skeleton waiting for the flesh of the building. If we poured hot, dry concrete into that mesh now, without the chemical adjustment, it wouldn't bond. It would look fine for about 12 hours. Then, as the thermal contraction hit tonight, it would snap. I'm not pouring bad mud, Brock, I said firmly, my hand still on the valve of the admixture tank. It's my license on the line. Brock's face turned a shade of red that rivaled the warning flags on the perimeter fence. The heat was getting to everyone, but for Brock, it was cooking his insecurity into a dangerous rage. The air was so thick with heat you could practically chew it. The pump operator was watching us, his hand hovering over the kill switch for the auger. The entire crew had stopped moving. In this industry, silence is louder than jackhammers. Did you just tell me no? Brock asked, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet tone men use right before they do something stupid. I'm telling you the physics of the situation, I countered, checking my watch. 11:00 a.m. The sun was merciless. Concrete doesn't care about your authority, Brock. It reacts to heat. If I don't add the high-temp 400 solution right now, you are going to have a catastrophic structural failure. High-temp 400, Brock mocked, rolling his eyes. That expensive snake oil you convinced my uncle we needed. We poured foundations for 30 years without your magic potions. Not in July, not in Arizona, and not for a structure with this load-bearing requirement, I said, stepping onto the truck's ladder to reach the port. I'm dosing the load. Brock grabbed the back of my safety vest and yanked. It wasn't enough to throw me off balance, but it was physical contact, a massive violation of safety protocols and basic decency. I froze, gripping the ladder, and turned to look at him. Don't touch me, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the site noise. Then get down. Brock screamed, losing it completely. I am sick of you stalling my pores. I am sick of you undermining me in front of the guys. You think because you've got some fancy certification you run this show. You're a finisher, Hill, you smooth out the dirt. That's it. I am the site quality control manager, I corrected him. And I am telling you, this load is rejected unless treated. Brock pointed a shaking finger at the gate. Get out. I blinked, wiping sweat from my eyes. Excuse me. You heard me. You're fired. Get off my site. The words hung in the superheated air. Sarah gasped behind me. Derek, the yes man, looked down at his boots, unwilling to make eye contact. You can't fire me mid-pour, Brock, I said, a cold calm settling over me. I'm the certified officer for the high-temp admixture. If I leave, you legally cannot use the chemical. If you don't use the chemical, the slab fails. Brock laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. Oh, watch me. I've seen you dump that jug 100 times. Derek can do it. Hell, Sarah can do it. It's just liquid. You're not special, Natalia. He stepped closer, puffing his chest out. That's the problem with diversity hires. You think the rules don't apply to you. But the truth. Concrete women slow the crew. You overthink, you whine about the heat, and you complicate simple jobs. I want this poured fast and hard. You're in the way. Concrete women slow the crew. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was the feeling of a heavy burden suddenly being lifted. I had spent 6 months fighting Brock to do this job right, losing sleep over stress fractures and psi ratings. And in one sentence, he had just absolved me of all responsibility. You want me off the site? I asked, unclipping my radio. Immediately, Brock said. Leave your badge, I'll mail you your final check. Although, for insubordination, don't expect a severance. I looked at the mixer truck. The drum was spinning slowly, the concrete inside churning, getting hotter, tighter, and more dangerous by the second. I looked at the rebar grid, expansive and expensive. And then I looked at Brock, sweat staining the armpits of his pristine polo shirt. Okay, I said. I climbed down from the truck. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just unclipped my site badge and dropped it into the dust at his feet. Good luck, Brock, I said. I don't need luck, he spat. I need men who work. Walking away from a job site usually feels like leaving a battleground. You're tired, dirty, but you feel accomplished. This felt like walking away from a ticking bomb that I had been trying to defuse. I moved to the equipment tent to gather my personal gear. My hands were steady as I packed my specialized trowels, my laser level, and my digital hygrometers. These weren't company tools, they were mine, paid for with years of overtime. Sarah came running up to the tent, her eyes wide and wet. Natalia, you can't go. What do I do? He's telling Derek to just pour the water in. He's skipping the chemical. I zipped up my heavy canvas bag and looked at the kid. She had potential, but she was about to learn a very hard lesson about leadership. Sarah, listen to me closely, I said, keeping my voice low. Do exactly what he says. Do not argue. Do not try to fix it. If he tells you to pour water, you pour water. Make sure you log it in your personal notebook. Time, temperature, and exactly what he ordered. But it's going to crack. she whispered, looking back at the foundation where the pumps were revving up. Yes, I said simply. It is. But shouldn't we stop him? I slung my bag over my shoulder. It weighed about 40 pounds, but I barely felt it. I tried, Sarah. He fired the safeguard. Now he owns the disaster. You just protect yourself, document everything. I walked out of the tent and headed for my truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 parked near the perimeter fence. As I walked, I could hear Brock shouting orders. Crank that pump's speed up. Let's get this mud on the ground. We're making up time, boys. He was accelerating the pour, in 110-degree heat, without the retarder. He was effectively spreading quick-dry cement over an area the size of a basketball court. I reached my truck and threw my gear in the back. I climbed into the cab and cranked the AC. It blew hot air for a moment before cooling down, providing the first relief I'd felt in 5 hours. I sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I saw the boom of the concrete pump extend over the site. The gray sludge began to flow. Brock was standing there with his hands on his hips, looking like a conquering king. He had no idea. He thought the High-Temp 400 was just a brand name. He didn't know that the chemical composition was proprietary. He didn't know that the specific warranty for the Sterling complex required a certified technician, me, to oversee the mix. And he certainly didn't know that without my signature on the batch ticket, the concrete plant wouldn't honor the structural guarantee. But the biggest secret, the one that was going to cost him everything. I pulled my phone out and dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. It rang twice. Hello, a deep, gravelly voice answered. James, I said, watching the first yard of concrete splash into the trench. It's Natalia Hill. Natalia, everything okay? I haven't heard from you since the trench rescue. I need a favor, James. Actually, I need you to do your job, but I'm calling in the debt. There was a pause on the line. James Nelson was the chief city inspector for our district now, a man who took structural integrity very, very seriously. Name it, he said. I just got fired from the Sterling site. Mid-pour, 110 degrees, no additives. Jesus, James hissed. That's illegal. The code requires. I know what the code requires, James. I want you to wait. Wait for what? Wait until tomorrow morning, I said, watching Brock high-five Derek in the distance. Let them finish. Let it set. Let them think they got away with it. I want you to come out here when the sun comes up and see what a $10 million mistake looks like. I'll be there at 7:00 a.m., James said. Thanks, James. I hung up and put the truck in drive. As I pulled out onto the main road, I didn't look back, the walk of shame. No, this was the drive to safety before the building collapsed. The silence after the chaos of a construction site is strange. It's heavy. At 5:00 p.m., I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at the wall clock. The pour would be finished by now. The crew would be washing out the chutes, exhausted, dehydrated, and probably celebrating. Brock would be buying a round of beers, bragging about how he trimmed the fat and got the job done faster without me nagging him about slump tests. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Sarah. He made us add 30 gallons of water to the last 2 trucks. Said it was too stiff to pump. I logged it. I closed my eyes. 30 gallons. Concrete is a chemical reaction, not a soup. You can't just add water to make it flow better once the hydration process starts. It breaks the molecular bonds. It weakens the psi, the pounds per square inch of pressure the concrete can hold. By adding water to a mix that was already cooking in 110-degree heat, Brock had essentially turned the foundation into a brittle, chalky mess. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Anything I said now could be used against me later. I was no longer an employee of Halloway Construction. I was a liability. But the real sound of tension wasn't my phone buzzing. It was the imaginary sound in my head, the creak and pop of drying concrete. As the sun went down and the desert air cooled rapidly, the thermal shock would begin. The outer layers of the slab would cool and contract while the inner core remained hot and expanded. Without the retarder to slow the cure, and without the proper fiber reinforcement matrix that I usually added, the stress would be too much. The concrete would tear itself apart. I poured myself a glass of iced tea and sat on my back porch. The Arizona sunset was a bruised purple and orange, beautiful if you didn't know how dangerous the heat was. My phone rang again. This time it was Lawyer Kincaid. "Natalia," his voice was sharp, professional. "I got your message. Fired mid-shift." "Yeah," cause stated. "Insubordination." Actual cause: refusal to violate safety protocols and manufacturer specs. "Did you sign anything?" "Nothing. I walked. He has my badge." "Good. Don't sign a termination letter. Don't sign a severance agreement. Don't sign a birthday card. We are going to let them hang themselves." "Kincaid," I said, watching a lizard scurry across my patio. "He didn't use the high-temp 400. There was a pause. Kincaid knew construction law better than most engineers. The proprietary admixture. The one the Sterling contract specifically mandates for warranty. "The one I hold the patent for," I reminded him, "and the one he isn't certified to handle even if he wanted to." "So, let me get this straight," Kincaid said slowly, a smile audible in his voice. "He fired the only person licensed to apply the chemical that makes the building legal." "Correct. And he poured anyway." "He poured anyway, with extra water." Kincaid chuckled. It was a dry, terrifying sound. "Natalia, get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a very expensive day for Mr. Holloway." I didn't sleep well. I kept dreaming of cracks spiderwebbing across a gray surface, wider and wider until they swallowed the whole world. At 6:30 a.m., I was parked in my truck across the street from the Sterling site. I wasn't going in, I was just watching. The sun was barely up, but the heat was already building. The site was quiet. The crew wouldn't arrive until 7, but one truck was already there, a white city municipal vehicle with flashing amber lights. James Nelson. He was standing by the perimeter fence, looking at the massive slab of fresh concrete. Even from here, I could see his posture, hands on hips, head shaking. He was wearing his safety vest and hard hat, holding a clipboard. I got out of my truck and walked across the street. I stayed on the public sidewalk, well outside the property line. James saw me and walked over to the fence. "Morning, Hill," he said. His face was grim. "Morning, James. How's it look?" "Like a map of the Grand Canyon," he said, gesturing with his pen. "I've seen shrinkage cracks before, but this is structural failure. There are fissures running 3 inches deep near the rebar cages." I nodded. "He added water." "He added a swimming pool," James corrected. "The surface is dusting. I scratched it with my key and it crumbled. Psi is probably half of what spec requires." "Did you red tag it?" "Oh, I did better than that," James said, a tight smile appearing. "I issued a stop work order for the entire site, immediate suspension of all permits pending a structural review." Just then, a sleek black Range Rover pulled up to the gate. Brock jumped out, looking frantic. He was followed by Derek. "What is this?" Brock screamed, seeing the bright red tag zip-tied to the gate. "Who put this here?" James turned slowly. He was a big man, 6'4", built like a linebacker. He didn't yell, he just projected authority. "I did," James said. Brock stormed over to the fence. "Who the hell are you? I have a schedule. You can't just shut me down." "James Nelson, Chief City Inspector," James said, tapping the badge on his chest. "And actually, Mr. Holloway, I can shut you down, and I just did." Brock looked at James, then he looked past him and saw me standing on the sidewalk. His eyes narrowed. "You," he hissed. "You called him, you bitter, washed up." "Careful, son," James interrupted, his voice dropping an octave. "MS. Hill is a witness. And frankly, she's the only reason this building isn't going to kill someone 5 years from now. She's a fired employee with a grudge." Brock yelled, his face flushing red again. "This concrete is fine. It's curing. It looks like that because of the heat." "It looks like that because you fired the technician who knew how to handle the heat," James said. "I'm ordering core samples. We're drilling today. If those samples fail the compression test, and looking at these cracks, they will, you are tearing this whole foundation out." Brock went pale. "Tear it out. Do you know how much this pour cost? $50,000 in material alone. Plus labor, I added from the sidewalk. Plus demolition, plus disposal fees, plus repouring. You're looking at $250,000, Brock. Shut up, he screamed at me. You did this, you sabotaged the mix. I wasn't even here, remember. I said calmly, you fired me before the pour was finished. I have witnesses. This is bullshit. Brock kicked the fence. I'm calling my uncle, I'm calling the owner. Please do, James said. Mr. Sterling is actually on his way. I called him myself. By 8:00 a.m., the site was a circus. The crew had arrived but couldn't work because of the red tag. They stood around the catering truck, whispering and looking at the massive, pale gray slab that was supposed to be their paycheck for the week. The cracks were visible now, even from a distance. Long, jagged lines that looked like lightning strikes frozen in stone. They weren't just surface crazing, they were deep structural wounds. I had moved my truck down the block but stayed close enough to watch. Kincaid had advised me to stay visible but silent. A specialized drilling truck arrived, the testing lab. 2 technicians in white hard hats got out with a diamond-tipped core drill. This was the moment of truth. Core sampling is brutal. It's like a biopsy for a building. They drill a cylinder of concrete out of the slab, cap it, and then crush it in a hydraulic press to see exactly how much force it takes to break. I watched through binoculars as they set up the rig on the northeast corner, the corner where Sarah had texted me they added the most water. The drill whined, a high-pitched scream as it cut through the aggregate. Water sprayed to cool the bit. It took about 10 minutes. When the technician pulled the core sample out, he didn't even need to test it. I saw him hold it up. The bottom half of the cylinder simply crumbled away in his hands. It wasn't concrete. It was barely hardened gravel held together by weak cement paste. James was standing right there. He took a photo of the crumbling sample. Then he walked over to Brock, who was pacing back and forth on his phone. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the body language. James showed Brock the photo. Brock stopped pacing. He stared at the phone screen. His shoulders slumped. Then, a silver Mercedes sedan turned the corner. It moved slowly, ominously. Mr. Sterling had arrived. He was the client, a man who built casinos and high-end resorts. He was known for being ruthless with contractors who wasted his time. He stepped out of the car in a pristine linen suit, sunglasses reflecting the harsh morning sun. He walked up to the gate, looked at the red tag, looked at the cracking slab, and then looked at Brock. I saw Brock start talking, his hands waving, pointing at me, pointing at the truck, pointing at the sky. He was spinning a story. He was blaming the heat. He was blaming the supplier. He was blaming the disgruntled employee. Sterling didn't say a word. He just listened, his face an unreadable mask. Then Sterling turned and looked at James. James nodded and handed him the clipboard with his report. Sterling read it. He flipped the page. He read some more. Then, he did something that made my heart hammer in my chest. He looked around the site, scanning the faces. He looked past the crew, he looked past the fence, and his gaze landed on me leaning against my truck across the street. He said something to James. James nodded and pointed at me. Sterling started walking toward the gate. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't storming. He was walking with purpose. He walked right out of the construction site, crossed the street, and stopped 10 feet in front of me. "Ms. Hill?" he asked. His voice was smooth, cold, and terrifyingly calm. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," I said, standing up straight. "The inspector tells me you were the site quality control manager until yesterday morning." "That's correct. He also tells me you warned the foreman that this would happen." "I did. And he fired you for it." "He did." Sterling took off his sunglasses. His eyes were icy blue. "Can you fix it?" I looked at the disaster across the street. "Fix that slab? No, that has to come out, it's garbage." "I don't mean the slab," Sterling said. "I mean my project. Can you fix the project?" I looked him in the eye. "If I'm in charge, yes, but not with him." I nodded toward Brock. Sterling turned back to look at his foreman, who was watching us with a look of pure terror. "Interesting," Sterling said. "Stay close, Ms. Hill. I think we need to have a meeting." The construction trailer was a sterile box of beige walls and buzzing fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the brutal heat outside. Mr. Sterling sat at the head of the laminate table, his fingers steepled. Brock Halloway sat opposite him, looking like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. I stood near the door, arms crossed, feeling the cool blast of the AC on my neck. 72 hours, Sterling said, his voice dangerously calm. That's how far behind schedule we are now, and that's assuming we don't have to rip out the entire North Foundation. It's just surface cracking, Mr. Sterling, Brock insisted, wiping sweat from his upper lip. A skim coat will hide it. The structural integrity is fine. The structural integrity is non-existent, I interjected. You added 30 gallons of water to a high-performance mix. You broke the chemical bond. It's not concrete anymore, Brock. It's glorified sand. Brock slammed his hand on the table. You don't know what you're talking about. You weren't even there. Exactly, Sterling said, cutting through the noise. He turned his gaze to Brock. You fired your quality control manager in the middle of a critical pour. Why? She was insubordinate. She was slowing down the crew. She was trying to save my building, Sterling corrected. Inspector Nelson showed me the batch tickets. The water was added at 11:15 a.m. Ms. Hill was terminated at 11:00 a.m. Is that correct? Brock faltered. I had to make a command decision. A stupid decision, Sterling said. He opened a folder on the table. I've reviewed the contract specs. The foundation requires a Type V sulfate-resistant mix with a specific high-temp admixture. Who is certified to apply that admixture? Silence filled the room. Brock looked at his hands. I am, I said, and without my signature on the pour log, the warranty from the concrete supplier is void. Sterling looked at Brock. So, not only did you ruin the slab, you voided the insurance on my $10 million investment. Is that accurate? Brock's face went from red to pale. I can fix it. I'll get the supplier to sign off. They want the business. They won't, I said, because I already called them. I told them exactly what happened. They are sending a rep out this afternoon to pull their certification from the site. Sterling leaned back in his chair. Mr. Halloway, you are dismissed. What, you're firing me? Brock stood up, knocking his chair back. My uncle owns this company. You can't fire me. I'm not firing you, Sterling said coldly. I'm firing Halloway Construction. Get your equipment off my site by end of day. Brock stared at him, mouth open. Then he looked at me with pure venom. You did this, you bitch. Get out, Sterling said. Brock stormed out, slamming the door so hard the cheap trailer walls rattled. Sterling turned to me. Ms. Hill, can you run a crew? I've been running crews for 20 years, I said. Just never had the title. Well, now you do, Sterling said. I'm terminating my contract with Halloway. I'm hiring you directly as an independent consultant to oversee the remediation and the new pour. Can you get a team together? I smiled. I know a few guys who are looking for work, good finishers. People who understand that concrete doesn't care about your ego. Good, Sterling said. Fix this mess, Natalia. The victory felt good, but it was short-lived. Brock wasn't the type to go quietly. Over the next 2 days, strange things started happening on the site. Equipment went missing. Extension cords were cut. A pallet of expensive epoxy rebar mysteriously tipped over in the night, bending half the steel. I knew it was him, or Derek, or someone loyal to the Halloway name. I hired a private security guard for the night shift, paying him out of my own pocket until Sterling's retainer came through. I also installed trail cameras around the perimeter, cheap, motion-activated ones I used for hunting. The remediation work was brutal. We had to bring in jackhammers and skid steers to break up the bad concrete. It was loud, dusty, back-breaking work. Every chunk of gray rubble we hauled away was a physical reminder of Brock's arrogance. Sarah, my former apprentice, had quit Halloway the day after the disaster. She called me, crying, asking for a job. I can't pay you what they paid, I told her, but I can teach you how to do this right. She was on site the next morning at 6:00 a.m., ready to work. We were 3 days into the demo when I got a call from the concrete plant. "Natalia," the dispatcher said, sounding nervous. "We got a call from a Mr. Holloway. He says he's legally disputing the lien on the original pour. He's threatening to sue us if we supply you." "He has no standing," I said. "Sterling owns the land. Holloway is gone." "I know, but he's claiming theft of intellectual property. Says the mix design was his." I laughed. "The mix design is standard. The admixture is mine. The high temp 400, remember." "Yeah, about that," the dispatcher hesitated. "He says he has a patent pending on a similar formula. He's trying to get an injunction to stop you from using it." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Brock was petty, but he wasn't smart enough to come up with a chemical patent on his own. Someone was helping him. "Send me the paperwork he sent you," I said. "I'll handle it." I hung up and called Kincaid. "He's flailing," Kincaid said after reviewing the documents. "This patent pending is a joke. It's a copy-paste of a generic retarder formula from a textbook. But he can use it to stall us. He wants to bleed Sterling dry with delays." "He wants to make me fail," I said. "He wants Sterling to think I can't deliver." "Exactly. We need to crush this fast. I'm filing a motion to dismiss, but the courts are slow." "I can't wait for the courts," I said, watching Sarah guide a jackhammer. "We need to pour the new foundation by Friday, or we miss the inspection window." "Then you need to prove he's lying," Kincaid said, "publicly." Thursday morning, the day before the new scheduled pour. The site was prepped. The bad concrete was gone. The rebar was tied. The forms were oiled. But the concrete plant was still holding the delivery. The injunction threat had scared their legal department. I was pacing the site office when a black sedan pulled up. It wasn't Sterling. It was a man I didn't recognize, slick suit, expensive briefcase. He was followed by Brock. They walked right past the no trespassing sign. "Ms. Hill," the suit said. "I'm Arthur Vance, representing Holloway Construction. We are serving you with a cease and desist order regarding the use of proprietary chemical mixtures on the site." Brock stood behind him, smirking. "Told you I wasn't done, Natalia." I took the paper. "This is garbage, Brock. You don't own the chemistry." "We own the process," the lawyer said smoothly. "Mr. Holloway developed a unique application method while employed here. You are attempting to appropriate his trade secrets." I stared at them. "Application method? You mean pouring it in a bucket?" "It's more complex than that," the lawyer said. Just then, another car pulled up. A city inspector truck, but it wasn't James. It was a woman I didn't know. She walked up, clipboard in hand. "I'm Inspector Davis. I'm here for the pre-pour inspection." "Perfect timing," Brock said. "Inspector, this site is under legal dispute. No work can proceed." Inspector Davis looked at the paperwork, then at me. "Is this true?" "It's a frivolous claim," I said, "but yes, they filed it." "Then I can't sign off," Davis said, capping her pen. "City policy, we don't get involved in civil disputes. Call me when it's resolved." She turned to leave. Brock grinned. "Looks like you're not pouring tomorrow, Hill, or next week, or ever." I felt the heat rising, not from the sun, but from pure, unadulterated rage. He was going to win, not because he was right, but because he was willing to burn everything down to hurt me. Then my phone buzzed. A text from James. "Check the trail cam footage from Tuesday night. 2:14 a.m. I frowned. I hadn't checked the cameras since the demo started. I pulled up the app on my phone. I scrolled back to Tuesday. 2:14 a.m. The video was grainy, black and white infrared, but it was clear enough. 2 figures climbing the fence. One was tall, lanky, Derek. The other was shorter, stockier, Brock. They walked over to the admixture tanks, my tanks, the ones I had brought on site for the new pour. In the video, Brock pulled out a jug. He unscrewed the cap of my high-temp 400 tank and poured something inside. Contamination. He wasn't just claiming the tech was his. He was actively sabotaging my supply. I looked up from my phone. Brock was still smirking. "Inspector Davis," I yelled. "Wait." She stopped. "Ms. Hill, my hands are tied." "Not if there's a criminal act involved," I said, holding up my phone. "I have video evidence of Mr. Holloway trespassing and tampering with construction materials on a closed site. That's a felony." The lawyer's smile vanished. Brock's smirk froze. "Let me see that," the lawyer demanded, reaching for my phone. I pulled it back. "No, but I'll show the inspector, and then I'm sending it to the police." I walked over to Davis and played the video. She watched it twice. Then she looked at the tank in the background of the shot, the same tank sitting 10 feet away from us. "Is that the tank?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And if we test that liquid right now, I guarantee it's contaminated with something that would ruin the concrete." Davis turned to Brock. "Mr. Holloway, I'm going to need you to step back. I'm calling the police." "That's not me," Brock stammered. "It's dark, you can't see who that is." "I can see your truck parked outside the gate in the next frame," I said, swiping left. "License plate visible." Brock lunged. "Give me that phone." I stepped back, but he was fast. He grabbed my wrist. "Hey!" Sarah screamed, running over with a shovel, but she didn't need to swing. A heavy hand landed on Brock's shoulder and spun him around. It was Mr. Sterling's driver, a massive ex-military guy who had been quietly watching from the car. He didn't say a word, he just held Brock in place. "Let go of her," the driver said. Brock went limp. The fight drained out of him instantly. "It was just a prank," Brock whispered. "We were just messing around." "Sabotage isn't a prank, Brock," I said, rubbing my wrist. "It's a crime." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Brock. The police arrived within 15 minutes, viewing the footage of him trespassing and tampering with construction materials. While they didn't arrest him on the spot, they took a formal report, and the look on the officer's face said everything. This wasn't a civil dispute anymore. It was criminal mischief and potential industrial sabotage. The lawyer, Arthur Vance, suddenly found he had an urgent appointment elsewhere. He packed his briefcase and left Brock standing there with the police, muttering about misunderstandings. But the real blow came from Sterling. He arrived an hour later, stepping out of his car with a cold fury that made the 110-degree heat feel like a spring breeze. He walked straight up to Brock, who was now sitting on the curb, head in his hands. "You're done," Sterling said. "I just got off the phone with your uncle. He's pulling your bond. You are no longer insured to work in this state." Brock looked up, eyes wide. "He can't do that, I'm family." "He can when you cost him a $10 million contract and expose his company to criminal liability," Sterling replied. "And just so we're clear, I am suing you personally for the remediation costs, every dime." Brock stood up, trying to muster some of his old arrogance. "You think you can ruin me? I know people in this town." "You know people who tolerate you because of your last name," Sterling corrected. "But when the video of you pouring contaminant into a safety-critical chemical tank goes public, you won't be able to get a job mixing cement at Home Depot." It was brutal, it was total, and it was exactly what he deserved. As Brock drove away, his tires kicking up dust for the last time, I felt a strange emptiness. The villain was gone, but the mess remained. "Ms. Hill," Sterling said, turning to me, "what about the tank? Is the chemical ruined?" I walked over to the large polyethylene tank labeled High Temp 400. I opened the lid and sniffed. It smelled like sugar. "Sugar water," I said, dipping a finger in and tasting a tiny drop. "Oldest trick in the book. Sugar acts as a super retarder. It kills the set completely. If we had used this, the concrete would never have hardened. It would have stayed soup forever." "Can we get a replacement in time for tomorrow?" Sterling asked, checking his watch. "The supplier needs 24 hours lead time," I said, "but I have a backup stash in my garage. It's enough for half the pour. I can get the rest from a friend in Phoenix if I leave now." "Do it," Sterling said. "I'll cover the transport costs. Just get this foundation poured." Friday morning, the day of redemption. The site was buzzing. We had 2 pump trucks set up, a fleet of mixers lined up down the street, and a crew of 20 finishers ready to go. The temperature was already 95 degrees at 6:00 a.m. This was it. The same heat, the same pressure, but a different leader. I stood on the catwalk, radio in hand. "All right, listen up. We are pouring a Type V mix with a custom retarder blend. Slump is critical. If it's over 4 inches, send it back. If the drum temp is over 90 degrees, ice it down. Nobody touches the water valve but me. Is that clear? Clear, the crew shouted back. The first truck rolled in. I climbed the ladder just like I had on that disastrous day. I checked the ticket. I checked the drum temp. I added my specific dose of high temp 400, the real stuff from my personal stock. Pour it, I said. The concrete flowed. It was perfect. Creamy, workable, holding its slump even as the sun beat down. For 10 hours, we worked like a machine. I was everywhere checking levels, smoothing edges, monitoring the hydration rate. Sarah was right beside me, learning, sweating, and smiling. Around 2:00 p.m., the heat peaked at 112 degrees. It was brutal, but we were ready. We had misting stations for the curing slab. We had evaporation retarders sprayed on the surface immediately after finishing. We had thermal blankets ready for the night. By 5:00 p.m., the last truck was empty. The foundation was done. It was a massive, smooth, dark gray monolith. James Nelson arrived at 5:30 for the inspection. He walked the entire perimeter, checking for cold joints, checking for plastic shrinkage cracks. He spent 20 minutes just staring at the surface. Finally, he walked over to me and Sterling, who was watching from the shade. "Well?" Sterling asked. James took off his hard hat and wiped his brow. "Mr. Sterling, in 20 years of inspecting, I have never seen a hot weather pour this clean. It's textbook." Sterling let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a week. He turned to me and extended a hand. "Thank you, Natalia." "Don't thank me yet," I said, shaking his hand. "Wait for the 7-day break test." But I knew, I could feel it. The concrete was happy. It was bonding. It was becoming stone. That night, I sat on my porch with a cold beer. My phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Local contractor Brock Halloway charged with felony vandalism and reckless endangerment. There was a mugshot. He looked tired, scared, and small. I took a sip of beer. The $10 million crack in his ego was permanent. 7 days later, the lab results came back. The concrete cylinders we cast during the pour had broken at 4,500 psi, 20% higher than the engineered requirement. It was stronger than the original spec. We were standing on the slab, me, James, Sterling, and Sarah. The surface was hard, smooth, and cool to the touch despite the morning sun. "You saved my project," Sterling said, "and you saved me a lot of future lawsuits." He handed me an envelope. "This is your consulting fee, plus a bonus." I opened it. It was a check for $50,000, more than I made in a year at my old rate. "I also have a proposition," Sterling said. "I'm starting a new development in Scottsdale. Bigger than this. I need a project manager. Someone who understands the materials, not just the schedule." I looked at the check, then at the solid ground beneath my boots. "I'm expensive," I said, smiling. "Quality usually is," Sterling replied. I looked at Sarah. "I'll need an assistant, someone with potential." Sarah beamed. The twist wasn't just that I saved the building. It was that the patent for the high temp 400, the secret sauce that Brock tried to steal and then sabotage, was finally approved by the patent office 2 weeks later. Sterling bought the exclusive licensing rights for his future projects, giving me royalties on every yard of concrete he poured in the desert. I wasn't just a finisher anymore. I was an inventor. And Brock? He was facing 3 years of probation and a lifetime ban from holding a contractor's license.